Let's bring in Chuck Freilich, the former Israeli Deputy National Security Advisor. Chuck, good morning to you. Thank you for joining us. We're close to a deal here, but Iran says there's still 3 outstanding issues at play. What is the probability the U.S. will agree to these? The biggest one, reports say that the U.S. is not really leaning toward is removing the IRGC from the designated list of terrorist organizations. So what's the likelihood the U.S. is willing to budge?
Well, first of all, these are supposedly the final negotiations, the last round, and both sides are supposed to give their answers. And not surprisingly, the Iranians, in typical negotiating fashion of theirs, and maybe quite effectively from their point of view, have come back with a yes, but kind of answer. And we're willing to reach an agreement, but we have our additional demands, as you indicated. I don't think we know what the U.S. is going to do here. The Iranian demands are difficult ones from the American position. The U.S. already rejected the demand that that the U.S. remove the IRGC from the terrorism list. The Iranian demand that the nuclear files, the 3 undeclared sites that they haven't allowed access to, where they're suspected of nuclear activity, and I think it's pretty clear that it took place, otherwise they'd be quite happy to give access. It's hard to imagine that the U.S. and the international community will agree to back off this. And the final demand dealing with sanctions is also difficult. So we may actually not be at the final stage, and there may not be a deal.
And Chuck, what would a return to the deal look like for Iran, though? They now have the education, the knowledge, the science to enrich uranium and produce weapons, it seems. So who's to say that they won't simply change their stance once the nuclear deal is in play, the same way the U.S. changed their minds? We do know there's a clause that the U.S. cannot pull out of the deal with further administrations like we saw with the Trump administration. But what can we see from their side?
Well, first of all, there's no way to compel the U.S. not to withdraw in the future. That's an Iranian demand that the Biden administration basically rejected. They said, we will pull out, but we can't, by law, commit future American administrations. Look, the Iranians can cheat. Any side can cheat. And if you're afraid of that, then, of course, you should never sign any agreement. And at the same time, obviously, we would have to follow up very, very closely to make sure that the Iranians do not violate the agreement. And if they do, there's always the possibility of snapback sanctions. But I think the tenor of the debate in Israel tends to be focused on, oh my God, how bad this agreement might be for us, when in point of fact, a large part of the defense establishment, and I personally and many other outside analysts, actually think that a return to the agreement, for all of its many faults, is the best of the bad options we face. There are no good options here. Iran has enough fissile material for a first bomb already today, not 10 years from now, today. What they don't yet have is the capability to deliver it on a missile warhead, and the assumption is that they need a year or 2 to do that. The only thing that can prevent them from going ahead and doing that is a deal, actually, a renewed diplomatic deal. Military action, whether Israeli, American, can gain a little bit of time, probably not very much, a couple of years optimistically. That's it. The only way to achieve a prolonged postponement is through a renewed nuclear deal. It's also only 9.5 years, and actually some of the constraints come off even before that, in 4.5 years. But it's the best of the bad deals at the moment, the best of the bad options.
And finally, very quickly, what do we think the Israeli response here will be to signing this deal? We do know that the Iranian threat has actually brought some countries together who we wouldn't ordinarily see working together, like the Israel and Saudi Arabia, and along with some other countries in the Gulf, on how to combat the Iranian threat. So what will Israel's response be should a deal be signed?
Well, if the deal is signed, Israel will try and do its best to use all of its intelligence capabilities to follow up on Iranian compliance. And at the same time, I presume that there will be ongoing efforts to undermine the nuclear program, sabotage in whatever way, and efforts that you were alluding to work together with other regional partners in the Gulf primarily, but not just, in trying to build this regional coalition against Iran. People have talked recently about an alliance. That's much too strong a word, but some cooperation. The fact that we can talk about any cooperation with the Gulf states is a remarkable development, a remarkable outcome of the Abraham Accords.
Chuck Freilich, the former Israeli Deputy National Security Advisor, joining us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.